Hello again, Steve here with a little bit of a story that hopefully has a moral to it. I'm going to call it the downside of not having a strong support network in our lives. Now, this is based on a very sad story that I heard last night. Somebody that I know at an event told a story about being scammed, basically, about somebody that she knew being scammed. And the story goes something like this. I'm not going to tell any names or anything, but the story goes something like this. She came here to this part of the world from a very far off part of the world. And we've all experienced this situation where we get some kind of an email that looks like it's coming from somebody else, but it's not coming from that person. It's somebody's gotten into our email, hacked into our email, and is sending stuff which looks sort of like us, but if we look into it, we see that it's probably a different email and so on, but it looks like us. Anyways, I'm not going to pretend to know the exact, I'm not going to portray this story exactly the same because I didn't write it down. I just heard it. It was approximately on the lines that she's here, her family's way over there. They get an email saying your daughter or your loved one's in trouble. And I'm so-and-so, her friend or whatever, and I'm trying to help her out, but I'm not right where she's at. And she asked me to reach out to you to try to help, see if you can help in some way. And it's late at night, the time difference is whatever, and I can't get to my bank. Can you help me out? Can you help her out somehow? And can you send her and so on? So anyways, something like along that line. The result was that her family wires the equivalent of $10,000 to some bank account to help this loved one of theirs out. It turns out to be a complete scam. This girl wakes up in the morning. She has emails from her family and whatever, and are you okay, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, she knows nothing about it. But because of her culture and so on, I guess, that they're very, very close, she ends up taking this as a big, huge guilt trip, that somehow she caused this loss of $10,000 that her family or her loved ones put out after being scammed. And her analysis of it was that she can't trust anybody anymore. And I don't know her that well, but I had seen her at various different events. Like, she had a certain height of personality. And then all of a sudden, I was wondering, I was going to ask her actually what happened. She seemed to be so kind of dull in a way. And must have been around the time it happened. The reason I wanted to talk a little bit about this, and the reason it impacted me so much, is it has a lot to do with what's being talked about in the media and whatever so much lately, which is this whole shifting of populations from here over to there. Like, everybody's completely interchangeable, right? Like, why don't we have a whole bunch of people go here and a whole bunch of people go there, and everybody will get along and big kumbaya and everything? Well, from my observation, that's not really what happens, Like, the reason we were tribal and national, evolutionarily wise, is because we needed one another. Because if we didn't have somebody covering our back, the jackals would be on us when we go out. If we just ran out into the grasslands, we could be in big trouble if we didn't have somebody looking out for us. And the same sort of thing is happening because humans are predators upon other predators. It always has been that way. I mean, there's been human, a lot of times the wars sometimes were about getting meat because they were cannibals or whatever. I mean, they would literally tear each other apart for food. I mean, and this to some extent is still going on, just in, more technology, but we haven't really changed. And, the short term, it's wonderful. This kumbaya is wonderful. You see all these different mixing of all these different peoples and their different foods and their different languages, their different music. And of course, there's always pros and cons to everything, right? Wonderful. In the long term, we're fracturing our closeness, right? And we see the results, right? We see the results of busted up families creating fractured individuals. We see this. We see the results of this idea of let's just let everything loose. Let's let the nations run wild. Let's have the tribes run wild. Let's have the family be detonated. And now what do we have? Right? We have all these a good degree of dysfunctional people who, because if we haven't changed that much in the way we behave, in the way we're nurtured, but we fracture the way we're nurtured, then it has to have a result, right? So the fracturing of the family then creates fractured tribal networks. The fracturing of the tribal networks fractures the nations. And the nations, of course, is like allied groups of related tribes. And the long term of this, it creates a lack of trust, because I've heard it over and over again that social trust is reduced when you have all this mixing going on. And this lady stood up and she told us this story, and she told us specifically that she doesn't trust anybody anymore. You know, it's like if she had had where was her network, right? She was off here and obviously doesn't know it. Her best friend apparently isn't even part of her tribe. She's a different ethnicity completely. It doesn't mean that she doesn't care deeply for her. But where is her real connection? Where was the people over in that other country? Why couldn't they contact somebody who she knew? Because there was no network. It's like running out into the jungle, right? With no network. You can't get a hold of them as she's sleeping or whatever. Can't get a hold of anybody she knows because the tribe is evaporated, right? That didn't, well, I suppose it always did happen, but it's good for us to realize what's going on. But what happens with this fracturing is it creates imagine that you had a group of antelope or whatever, and they hang together, right, as a greater, for greater protection or whatever, or the buffalo or whatever, they stand in a circle and put the little ones in the middle. Imagine if they just decided for some reason just to send the little ones out into the grasslands here and grasslands there and so on. They'd just be ripe for the picking, right? And this is what's happening. This is creating fertile soil for scam artists. And we see the scams all over the place. And I think there's a natural corollary. What can we learn from this, though? I hope this awareness, this greater awareness of the importance of social circles, related tribal social circles, or at least circles that are related in some way, right? It could be even philosophical circles or religious circles or whatever like that. The importance of this, the importance of that it's part of our self-knowledge, right? The more we know about ourselves, the more we realize that we have actually evolved to be tribal creatures. And therefore, our individuality is intrinsically connected to that tribal connection. And that does not take away from our individuality. It's like the brick in the wall is itself integral, and it has to be. But there wouldn't be no wall. There'd be no integral wall without all that connective mosaic of everything else, right? So I think it's along that line, right? And just be aware that when we break from that, I'm not going to say a tradition, is that state of nature that we find ourselves. When we break from that, we allow for this predation to creep in. And it's almost like, it's not to justify it, it's just an observation. And I could be wrong on this, but it's an observation. So my call, I guess, would be to let's build, strong individuals, strong selves, strong individuals. Let's build strong families. Let's build strong tribes. Let's build strong nations, right? And all of that strength built on trust, honesty, love, for sure, absolutely. But also a great degree of vigilance as well, because we have to, in order to have that strength of family, of tribe, of nation, and so on, we also have to be watching out for those who are vulnerable in that mix. So hopefully there's something we can learn from this, and it's a real shame. And actually in the story, she talked also about another person she knew who got a similar scam, also away from the tribe, right? So yeah, there's a lot to be learned from this, and it was a very sad story, and hopefully she can gain some trust and find a tribal connection, or somebody people who can, both her here and the people back there, can find ways to not have this happen again. I think there's a big learning experience for sure. And I also liked her message too, which is that, when something like this does happen, the biggest thing is to learn from it and not to let it run our lives as in grinding us down and grinding us down and grinding us down. And she actually had a message about, being the light that you want, being the change that you want in the world, being the light that you want to see in the world, rather than just allowing this predation to grind us down. That was a very powerful message too, but it was a good takeaway. Steve here, doing great chatting. Talk again soon. Bye for now.